So let's paint a picture for you, fellow conspiracy realists. It's September 2015. Your pals, Matt and Ben, are finally addressing a question that I think personally bothered both of them at this time. Osama Bin Laden, by this point, was dead. But when did he die?
Well, he died 10 years after the 9/11 attacks of 2001. And where was his body? What happened to his body?
Oh, it was buried at sea.
Huh. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. I feel like we need more information here.
I feel like it's not a hot take to say that many people, even in 2021 today, don't agree with the official narrative. So in this classic episode, we are looking at the official story, and then we're looking at some of the allegations that there may be more to the tale.
From UFOs to ghosts and government cover-ups, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
And I'm Ben, and as always, we are joined by our super producer, Noel the Politico Brown. Noel, I hope, is doing well.
I think he's doing just fine.
He's got a nod. So that's it's a positive nod or a bit of a shrug. As you know, our nicknames for our super producer are often hints or allusions to the nature of the episode. I guess for anyone who doesn't read the title, who says, I just want to plunge in.
I'm just playing this episode.
I'm just playing this episode, jumping into the great beyond of the podcasting world. This is an episode that is heavily political. We're not really taking any sides other than to say that I think we can all agree it is not good to kill people. That's a fairly basic assumption. That
I'm going to agree with you.
That regardless of someone's self-described political leaning or identification, they can agree with. So, Matt, with that disclaimer, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about kind of the guy that was held up as the boogeyman when I was going through high school and college up until around 2011.
Right, yeah, and I appreciate your use of the phrase boogeyman. We are talking about Osama Bin Laden and Osama related conspiracies, or should I say Laden related conspiracies. So this figure is shrouded in mystery and opprobrium and controversy even today, as our audience knows, both inside and outside of the States. This is the anniversary or the week anniversary of the September 11th attacks. And just for a refresher, what are those?
That is when the World Trade Center in New York City, as well as the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., were attacked, and another plane went down in Pennsylvania.
Right, spot on. So originally and often we have heard that Osama bin Laden was involved with these attacks to one degree or another, or associated with them.
Very quickly after it occurred, there were people on the news mentioning this man's name. Very quickly. And it was thought to be terrorism if you go back and watch the tapes. And, there are specials on every year now that go back through all of the footage that occurred. And there are people speculating about terrorism almost immediately after it occurred. Not even on the news, just people on the street.
Right. And there are also, of course, as you've noticed, with any large catastrophic event in U.S. history, from the attack on Pearl Harbor to the assassination of JFK or MLK to this event, there are numerous people and groups who disagree with the official version of events from the day the planes hit to 2011 when bin Laden passes away.
And there are also a lot of people who are probably angry that we're even talking about this right now, because we're going to be discussing some of the more fringe ideas. But the thing that Ben and I want you to know is that we are looking at facts that can be proven, and then also telling you what people believe. And then, like this show does every week, we just want you to think about it and come up with, your own belief structure around this.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to go ahead and do this because, of course, we are doing this live. Well, live for us, a record when you hear it. But I want to do this one more time, picking up at the end where I said leading up to Osama bin Laden, leading up to 2011 when Osama bin Laden died. Or did he? So that's a hint to some of the stuff coming up. So first we have to start at the beginning. Who is Osama bin Laden? Because for such a well-known name, a lot of people don't know very much about him other than, as you said, Matt, he was a boogeyman for people growing up.
Yes. So the man we know as Osama bin Laden, who is known in the West, at least in that way, is actually Osama bin Mohammed bin Awad bin Laden. He was born on March 10th, 1957 in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
His mother was Syrian. His father, Mohammed Awad bin Laden, was from South Yemen. Osama bin Laden was the seventh son of 50 brothers and sisters, all told, big family.
Huge.
The father is a success story. Started impoverished, worked his way up to become the owner of the largest construction company in Saudi Arabia. And during this time, his father became very close to the royal family due to his involvement in palace construction and other, royalty-related buildings.
Yeah, I can see how that would make them buddy-buddy in that regard. And Osama bin Laden grew up in a strictly religious environment. He went to school in Jeddah, and according to some official sources, he only traveled to a couple countries around the Arabian Peninsula: Syria, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Sudan. And that's according to these sources for his entire life. That's where he existed.
So the reason that we mention that is that you will often hear stories that he secretly went to Switzerland for one reason or another, or that he secretly traveled to another country, maybe in the West, maybe he went to, you'll hear wild stuff, or at least maybe a more fair way to say it is unsubstantiated stuff. He adopted the beliefs and precepts of the Muslim Brotherhood during his time in school, and you probably heard of the Muslim Brotherhood in different news reports about events in the Middle East. Yet at this time, he was not involved in violent or terrorist-like activities. So, to see what changed, we will consult an excellent timeline provided to us by the good folks at Frontline as well as some others, which means, of course, this is a timeline of official events, or at least proven events. Cast your memory back, December 26th, 1979, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, a boiling point in the proxy war there between Russia and the West. Bin Laden leaves his home in Saudi Arabia to join the Afghan resistance, the Mujahideen.
Yeah, and he's about, I think, 22 at this time. So, a 22-year-old, you can imagine, I guess those are college age years for us in the West, at least. He's going out and joining a resistance movement. Now we get to 1988. This is when Bin Laden officially established Al-Qaeda. This is, you've heard of them many, many times. They're an organization of ex-Mujahideen and other supporters. So the people who were fighting in Afghanistan.
Right. And during that interim 79 to 88, he did become a successful fighter, working his way up from a resistance fighter to a guerrilla commander. So when he establishes Al-Qaeda, he was also successful at raising funding, which we'll talk about as well. Let's go through just a few of the events that he was tied to. Okay, so real quick, in 89, the Soviets pull out of Afghanistan. Bin Laden comes back to Saudi Arabia. People love him. He's a hero. But he gets involved in movements against the monarchy, which, doesn't go over well in a theocracy like Saudi Arabia. In 1991, he's kicked out. moves back to Afghanistan, then to Sudan by 92, because at the time Sudan had allowed any Muslim into the country without a visa. And then if we fast forward a little bit later, a bomb explodes in a hotel in Aden, Yemen, right?
Yeah, this is a place where United States troops had been staying. They were en route to a humanitarian mission in Somalia. The bomb killed 2 Austrian tourists, and the U.S. soldiers apparently had already left once this attack occurred. And there were 2 Yemeni Muslim militants who were apparently trained in Afghanistan, who were injured in the blast as well. They're later arrested, and U.S. intelligence agencies allege that this was the first terror attack involving bin Laden and his associates.
Right. And as we go through this, we're going to hear more statements like attacks involving bin Laden, or he is associated or linked to it. So in 1993, February 26th, the World Trade Center bombing occurs. Later October of the same year, 18 U.S. troops are killed in Mogadishu. And, people begin suspecting that bin Laden and his followers trained and armed the men who killed the troops. Mm-hmm. They also believe intelligence analysts over the years become more and more certain that bin Laden isn't just leading terrorist groups, he's financing different training camps.
Yeah, training camps in, I think, Sudan, northern Sudan. Now, in April 1994, Saudi Arabia takes note of all this stuff and says, you're getting out of here. They revoke bin Laden's citizenship, and they make moves to even freeze all of his assets, at least the ones in Saudi Arabia, because of his support for some of these Muslim fundamentalist groups.
Yep. And so he is establishing through 94, 95, he's establishing more training camps around the Saudi Arabian border. In August of 1995, he writes a letter.
He writes a letter to the King of Saudi Arabia, and he calls for a campaign of guerrilla attacks in order to drive U.S. forces out of the kingdom.
And for the next few years, we're going to skip over some of the developments. Just a quick laundry list. 4 Saudi men accused of bombing the Saudi National Guard training center in the capital are beheaded before their execution. They claim to have read letters from bin Laden. 1996, President Clinton signs a top-secret order that authorizes the CIA to use any and all means to destroy the bin Laden network, as this is seen increasingly as a threat to U.S. forces or U.S. personnel or citizens abroad.
Yeah, they even set up a secret grand jury investigation into bin Laden in August of 96. Then, later in August of that year, 1996, bin Laden signed an issued declaration of jihad, where he basically set out the organizational goals of these groups that he had set up. They were to drive U.S. forces from the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, overthrow the government of Saudi Arabia, liberate Muslim holy sites, and support Islamic revolutionary groups around the world. He also, in this, declares that Saudis have the right to strike at U.S. troops inside the Persian Gulf.
All right. And 1997, U.S.-backed multinational mercenary force, allegedly, is formed with the aim of abducting and killing bin Laden. Obviously, it does not work. So bin Laden does something in 1998, issuing a joint declaration with several other groups where they try to form a World Islamic Front. Then let's go to 1998. There's a grand jury investigation of bin Laden, charging him with the conspiracy to attack defense utilities of the U.S. And this is where prosecutors charge that bin Laden heads a terrorist organization called Al-Qaeda. And, we can go through some of these dates quick. He does interviews with ABC Nightline. He later does interviews with Time, and a second interview with ABC. And during this time, he is eventually becoming maybe not public enemy number one, but one of the, let's say, top 15 for the U.S. When the U.S. Attorney's Office files its most complete indictment of Osama bin Laden in 1999 at the time, the grand jury charges him and 11 other people for conspiring to kill American nationals. So this is a real thing, a global conspiracy, if you will, to fight against or to assassinate American nationals or Western nationals. Multiple times Bin Laden states during his public appearances, if we could call them that the U.S. should not be in the Holy Land.
Yeah, and I noticed something in looking at all of this, Ben, that one of Osama bin Laden's main targets was the government and the leadership within Saudi Arabia. And it made me think about our petrodollar episode and the deal set up within Saudi Arabia with the United States to trade in US dollars. And I don't know, I was interested to know maybe Osama bin Laden is learning about this larger financial setup, global financial setup, as he's, in the Mujahideen and getting older. I'm interested to know how much that influenced.
Well, also many conservative Muslims object to the Saudi Arabian, the Wahhabi idea, right? And see it as a means of propping up, again, political support for the ruling House of Saud. Okay, and I want to take a second here before we continue, because we're talking a lot about terrorist groups that are Islamic, right? But the truth of the matter is that there are numerous terrorist groups, and they're not all Islamic, something that mainstream news in the West will try to slip past people. But it is true, there are Christian terrorist groups, there are Jewish terrorist groups, there are Hindi terrorist groups, there are so many groups like that. And as with any other religion, the vast majority, any religious practitioner demographic is not composed of violent, crazed people, right? It's composed of people who have a belief system that to some degree regulates or defines their life or the way they interact with the world. And that's it. And the Islamophobia that creeps into the West is entirely disingenuous.
You're absolutely right. The extremism is very different and should be separated from religion, right? They are two very different things. The extremist ideas of any group are not necessarily religious at their core.
So with that being said, let's go to the official story of the death. According to the official narrative, Osama bin Laden is killed in a compound on May 2nd, 2011 in Abbottabad, Pakistan. SEAL Team 6 invades the compound. They're doing a project called Operation Neptune Spear, which was meant to allegedly apprehend Osama bin Laden. They use stealth helicopters, one of which wrecks and is later taken probably to China for some reverse engineering. Accounts differ on what happened. You'll often hear that bin Laden resisted or his followers resisted. There was a firefight and he was killed. But either way, according to the official story, he was killed in the compound. And after that, they transported his body to Afghanistan for identification. And it turned out that it was him. And there was also earlier DNA evidence used to confirm this before they went in. And they took him to the USS Carl Vinson, which is the site where they controversially and allegedly gave him a burial at sea adhering to Islamic beliefs. Now, also, let me interrupt myself to make that correction. I believe Neptune Spear was a kill or apprehend mission. So that means if there was no resistance, they would take him alive.
Got you. Now, Ben, here's where it gets crazy. a lot of people don't believe at least part of that story. Many people don't believe any of that story. Not even the part where Osama bin Laden died in 2011. Some people even think that the entire role of Osama bin Laden is some kind of story that's meant to be told and retold, but is actually not true. Now, this is going to be a huge debate depending on who you talk to. Either way it goes. But here are some of the big ideas, the big conspiracies that surround the life of Osama bin Laden. The first one is that Osama bin Laden was actually a CIA operative, that he was, when he was fighting with the Mujahideen, he was actually trained by the CIA to start and lead groups, right? So they believe that Osama bin Laden and his groups received funding from Saudi Arabia and the United States, and that Al-Qaeda is actually a part of this and is a creation of the CIA.
Right. The primary crux of that debate being whether this was a willful creation or an inadvertent creation where it says, let's fight communism by arming the locals and telling them that they have the religious motivation, or they're somehow spiritually mandated to fight this war against these invaders. What could possibly go wrong?
And let's train this guy to be a leader, like an excellent leader of these guys to fight back in a resistance movement.
Mm-hmm. And on CNN, you can see a clip from the Larry King show where Bandar bin Sultan, one of the diplomats for Saudi Arabia, says, in the mid-'80s, if you remember, we and Saudi Arabia and the United States were supporting the Mujahideen to liberate Afghanistan from the Soviets. Osama bin Laden came to thank me for my efforts to bring the Americans, our friends, to help us against the atheist, he said, the communist. Isn't that ironic?
Larry King says, how ironic? In other words, he came to thank you for helping bring America to help him.
And what's strange about this, well, I guess I should say the opposite of strange, what's completely expected, the Central Intelligence Agency in the U.S. officials refute this, arguing that they only supported native Afghanistan Mujahideen, so not in any way bringing foreign fighters in or encouraging them. And you can read similar statements from other people involved, including the former head of the ISI, Pakistan's intelligence agency. There's this other idea that Osama bin Laden worked for the U.S. right up to September 11th. A person named Sybil Edmonds, who you've heard of before, I'm sure, said that the U.S. outsourced terror operations to Al-Qaeda and the Taliban for years and years and years.
That's outrageous, man.
Right. And according to some French sources, CIA agents met with bin Laden 2 months before 9/11. He was already wanted for the bombing of the USS Cole at that time. And then, allegedly 2 days before 9/11, 2 days, he called his stepmom and said, in 2 days, you're going to hear big news, and you're not going to hear from me for a while.
So in other words, Ben, it seems as though American forces, the U.S. Department of Defense and the CIA, had many opportunities to capture Osama bin Laden, and yet they failed to do so, or at least they did not do so. They chose not to, perhaps. Even after 9/11, the U.S. military intentionally allowed bin Laden to evade capture. Mm-hmm. It sounds pretty crazy, right?
Right. And for people who believe that the great game continues, this sort of intentional encouragement of instability seems completely plausible. However, of course, you have to point out, if we're being fair, that instability might be useful to a certain point, but complete anarchy and chaos is not. So that's the big crux of that idea. How involved, if at all, was Osama bin Laden with the CIA? If so, what degree of importance did they hold to each other? And to what degree was the U.S. somehow participating in this proxy war? Was it just training to local Afghanistan mujahideen, as the CIA and other officials maintain, or was it more active? And that's just one. There's another death-related belief, and that's that when people claimed that bin Laden was assassinated in 2011, it was entirely made up. It never happened, and that Osama bin Laden actually died years before, in 2001.
Yes, Ben, some people believe that Osama bin Laden actually died 10 years prior to his official death in 2011. They think he died in 2001. They think it was either from illness, from a lung, something going wrong with his lungs, or I've heard things about kidney problems and having to be on dialysis. They also believe that he may have been killed in an American bombing. Now, these aren't, I hate to say it, but fringe sources that are talking about this. These aren't nuts. These are government officials. And if they are nuts, Ben, they are at least government officials.
Right. I think that's pretty fair of you to say. We're talking about people like General Tommy Franks, former American military commander for Afghanistan, or former president of Pakistan, General Pervez Musharraf, who, as we mentioned on the video, you might remember from a strange and awkward interview on The Daily Show back when Jon Stewart was heading it. Personal hero of yours, Matt.
You don't like him?
No, I'm a big fan.
Okay.
But the officials that we're talking about, these generals, they seem to base this speculation, this conclusion on just the amount of bombing in the Tora Bora Mountains. So they hadn't actually seen a body or anything, at least according to the New York Times. And that is right, ladies and gentlemen. The New York Times reported on this too back in December 26, 2001.
Another source, the Pakistan Observer, went on. They quoted a Taliban leader who said that Osama bin Laden died of, quote, a serious lung complication back in December.
Yeah, and they also, that Pakistan Observer article adds more information, an alleged funeral, and of course, it seems like it's my role in this episode not my favorite role, but it's got to be done. It's my role in this episode to point out the other sides of the story. This is very close to wartime propaganda. So some people have doubted this, thinking that ISI, Pakistan's intelligence agency, supplied purposefully misleading information with the idea of throwing the U.S. war. When I say war machine, I don't mean anything other than an enormous and efficient thing. Some people believe that ISI, Pakistan's intelligence agency, purposefully misled the public, with the idea being that if the U.S. forces could be convinced that Osama bin Laden was dead, they might be thrown off bin Laden's trail. And so people who believe this idea, I mean, because this is a lot to think about. If someone dies in 2001, then how could you, even assuming you could pull it off by doing some massive conspiracy and cover up for a decade, why would you do that? Why would you go to all that trouble?
That is a tough question to answer, Ben, but it might go back to the idea that we said at the top of a boogeyman. I can see it being beneficial on either side. So from Pakistan's side, wanting to have this, at least he's a kind of a leader, an asset for intelligence and for strategy, having this person at least believed to be dead and then using him on the inside. I could see that being advantageous. Inversely, I can see it being advantageous to want to make people believe that he is still alive, because it creates this specter of the evil that you're fighting in all of these places. Right? It at least, it's good for morale for your troops. It's good for, even the people inside your country or other people that you're trying to inspire to fight these wars for you. I can imagine it being highly advantageous either way.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. People who believe this theory that bin Laden died in 2001 typically ascribe the motivation to things like that. You know, that it might be for political maneuvering, like the hostage crisis in Iran, that it might be due to an economically driven desire for war to continue, because some people do make a lot of money off of it. Although that seems a little bit far-fetched for me. Not that there would be people who would want war to continue so much as that there would need to be one person upon whom that decision hinges. I think it's very easy to create a situation wherein a war is quote unquote necessary.
Oh, sure. I think it's just helpful to have an iconic image or name or something that can be repeated over and over again.
Sure. Yeah. That begins to serve as sort of a metonymy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's also the idea of uncertainty. You wouldn't want to report that someone was dead if you didn't really think they were dead, because what a coup that is to come back from the dead in the public eye. So it could just be that people didn't know for sure. It could be, that there was an advantage politically speaking, for the timeline. So that's what people who believe he died in 2001 actually believe. And I think that Benazir Bhutto may have made some public statements about that too before her assassination.
Yes, I would, if I were you and you've not seen this, I would look up Benazir Bhutto, Osama Bin Laden, I think maybe died 2001, where she is being interviewed, and she states, at least according to the video, that Osama bin Laden died in 2001. But is she just referring to this information that was coming out of Pakistan? There are a lot of questions, and you can read multiple sources that will go either way. And it's tough to figure out what's true there. Like, what is she actually referring to?
And we'd love to hear what you think on this, listeners. So if you're hearing something, whether on this point or any of the earlier points or later stuff we talk about, and you'd like to weigh in, we'd love to hear your perspective. Of course, if you are a member of a military force, whether in the U.S., in Pakistan, somewhere else, we'd like to hear your perspective. We believe it is invaluable. And if you are not in the military, of course, we still want to hear from you and hear what you have found in the course of your delve into this rabbit hole. And speaking of rabbit holes, we have come to probably the most widely reported in the mainstream media disagreement with the official narrative. And it starts with a guy named Seymour Hersh, legendary journalist Seymour Hersh.
Yeah, you might remember this gentleman. I'm sure you probably saw the actual article pop up on Reddit. That's how I first came across it. He's the guy who wrote about the My Lai massacre and the cover-up in Vietnam. He also wrote about the Abu Ghraib prisoner abuse. That was an article that blew up all over London Review of Books. He's well-known, a very well-known, and I would say in maybe prestigious writer. He's somebody who was held up. Seymour Hersh, I believe, is somebody who is held up as being an authority in a lot of places.
Well, he's gone through a cycle of being derided and then lauded after, enough time passes. He says that the raid did happen that night on May 2nd, 2011. It just didn't go down the way people think. The U.S. official position is that the ISI and the top brass in the Pentagon had no idea that Osama bin Laden was living in that compound all along. They never thought, which is, very similar to Hitler surviving World War II and then Parliament finding out that he had a flat somewhere in London. So this is what Hersh says happened. He said a walk-in asset alerted the CIA. A walk-in asset is a very difficult proposition for the CIA because a walk-in asset could easily be a double agent or someone who is sincere but was misled.
And we're literally saying a walk-in asset. This is a person who walks into an official place and says, "Hey, I have information I want to share with you."
Right. Walks into the embassy and says, "I want to talk with someone," and all of a sudden you're learning a lot more about that consular attaché or the person who's the head of janitorial services turns out to have a couple of extra job duties of which you were not aware. So after this asset alerts the CIA and they manage to verify the information, Hirsch says that the Pakistani and American government struck a deal, and that they would stage this raid. So that Pakistan was going to give up bin Laden, and they were going to make it seem as though it were unilateral action on the part of the U.S.
One thing I just really quickly want to go back to, I was interested in the reasons, if this were true, why in the heck would Pakistan, if they knew that he was there, keep him there? And what I seem to find is that it was some kind of like, hey, we've got Osama bin Laden, you jihadist groups, or the groups that want to, overthrow governments and create havoc. We've got this guy, we're protecting him, you don't have to, it's okay, you don't have to hurt us. However, if they were keeping it secret, they wouldn't be telling anybody that, right? So it would only be Osama bin Laden's connections, I guess, to say, hey, don't attack Pakistan. I don't know. I was just trying to wrap my head around the reasoning behind it.
I mean, it's a heck of a poker chip.
Yeah, I mean,
to be crass about it.
Yeah.
It's also quite possible that at this point, bin Laden had little to no actual control over the situation, right? So a lot of, you'll hear people disagree about the degree of influence or control he had. Was he just releasing tapes saying, continue on, carry on my wayward son? Or was he instead, actively plotting things and telling people, show up on this day at this time, meet this guy, and plan the attack from there? And if so, to what degree? The problem is that a lot of this stuff remains classified. We can tell you about some things that were allegedly declassified, which we'll do in a little bit. Here's the next series of things that Hirsch says that led other journalists to attack him and say that he was a quote unquote conspiracy theorist, meaning it as an insult, as a don't pay attention to this guy. When
thought terminating cliche.
Right. When you think of him, think of reptilian hybrids or whatever. So Hirsch says bin Laden was never meant to survive the raid. He was supposed to be killed, and that he also, bin Laden that is, did not receive an Islamic burial at sea, did not receive a burial at sea at all. That this was a fabrication. A lot of the body was riddled with bullets, and some pieces were thrown out of the helicopter as they flew to Afghanistan. And one consultant, one anonymous source, told Hirsch that the CIA took the body once the remains landed in that country.
And all of this leads us to the next thing. This is something that I am very interested in. This is relating to the audio and visual evidence of Osama bin Laden speaking into a camera or being interviewed on camera or talking into a mic and giving orders and or, I guess just rallying the troops. There was a lot of media that was created over the years by Osama bin Laden, or allegedly by Osama bin Laden, because a lot of people believe that some of the videos that you may remember, some of the iconic ones, were actually not Osama bin Laden. One of the things that we can definitely point to as, hey, this is absolutely fact, is that there German experts looked at a bin Laden confession video from, I think was it 2001 or 2002? I think it was 2001, where they were saying that the video was itself incorrectly translated. They're not disputing that it was actually Osama bin Laden, but they were saying that it was perhaps purposefully, not translated correctly.
So in that case, they're saying that it was him. It was, the video is one where he's in a circle of followers. People had called it a, quote unquote, damning admission of guilt. But according to the German experts there. The tape's tampered with, contains translation errors.
And this is the one that is supposedly him saying, yes, 9/11, we did 9/11, basically.
Mm-hmm. The errors that they're mentioning, you can read about in more detail if you just search for German experts. I think it came under Spiegel. German experts say Bin Laden was confession incorrectly translated, and you'll find it, and you can find the discussion about it. I would say if you want to play a dangerous game and you do not yourself speak German, you can always put your faith in Google Translate and hope for the best. So there's another guy named Neil from Hacktor Factor who believes that a different tape of Osama bin Laden was manufactured from various earlier audio-visual appearances. Mm-hmm. And the person who says that this was such a compilation is a fellow named Neil Krawitz, a digital image forensics expert. He looked at the tape from September 7th, 2007, and said it was full of visual and audio splices. Not just that, but low quality, and it was a likely fake.
And then there's also I think it's a 2002 audio tape that was attributed allegedly to Bin Laden. There's a group of Swiss scientists that were saying this is fake. It's not actually Osama Bin Laden. And there's a Guardian article that you can read. You might be able to search 2002 Al-Qaeda, Bin Laden tape, perhaps. Sure. If you would be able to find it.
Yeah. And we can tell you a little bit about it. So, there is a thing called the Institute of Linguistics and Phonetics in Paris, and they found that based on the phonetic testing, the Al Jazeera tape was genuine. This tape was delivered to Al Jazeera in 2002, as Matt said. American experts also thought it was bin Laden, but the quality of the tape is pretty poor, so people aren't completely sure. But researchers at a place called the Dalmol Institute for Perceptual Artificial Intelligence believe the message was recorded by someone else. They built a computer model of Osama bin Laden's voice, and they based it on an hour of actual recordings. And then using voice recognition systems that were being developed for banking security, these Swiss scientists tested that synthetic model, or that created model, against 20 known recordings of the actual bin Laden. The system correctly identified his voice in 19 of them. And that means there's a 5% risk of error in their conclusion that the latest tape was a fake. So it's a little different too, because it's not a bunch of people listening to it and then mapping out something. It picks up things that the human the human ear probably doesn't record.
Now, here is the really weird thing, you guys, because there are all kinds of theories out there about videos that were Osama bin Laden impersonators. Oh man, you'll hear people writing online, or you'll see people writing online, man, Osama bin Laden looks really different in 2007 than he did in 2001 or 2006, or even, the later videos. That his appearance seems to change drastically over all of these videos. Well, here's the thing. The CIA actually did, or at least they had the idea to create a propaganda video of Osama bin Laden. And according to Jeff Stein, they actually did create it, at least according to the people that he spoke to.
Right, a propaganda video, correct?
Yes. I'm just going to go to the article that Jeff Stein wrote it's a blog called Spy Talk that he wrote for Washington Post. He's speaking, it's called CIA Unit's Wacky Idea, Depict Saddam as Gay. This was written in 2010 in May, specifically May 25th. And he's talking about the Iraq Operations Group. And they were kicking around ideas ways to discredit Saddam Hussein, to produce videos that would make Saddam look really bad. They would be grainy looking videos, perhaps taken from a cell phone or from just a really low quality camera that would not actually be Saddam doing compromising things, they were talking about making a sex tape, possibly with a teenage boy. and then flooding Iraq with the videos. They also talked about making a fake television program with fake news bulletins talking about how Saddam Hussein was going to step down and he was going to have his son come into power. So then about halfway down the article, he talks about how the agency, I guess he's referring to the CIA here, they did make a video purporting to show Osama bin Laden and his cronies sitting around a campfire, swigging bottles of liquor and savoring their conquests with boys. One of the former CIA officers recalled chuckling at the memory. That's a little strange to me that they even had that idea. Although I can see why that would be maybe a strategic move. It doesn't require any guns, right? At that point, it doesn't require any assets going in. It just, you'd make some videos and then send them around.
I think a lot of people wouldn't believe that, though, primarily for the consumption of alcohol.
Well, yeah, you're not supposed to do that, right?
And there's no judgment in brainstorming, so I'm sure this idea is just the tip of the propaganda iceberg that we are hearing about. There is one other conspiracy that we should mention about Osama bin Laden that a lot of people in the West might not have heard, but it has been fairly popular in the past in some other countries. And that is the idea that Osama bin Laden, like Elvis, Tupac, Kurt Cobain, or Jim Morrison, is somewhere, somehow, Michael Jackson as well, alive, and just hasn't been apprehended, will return to fight another day. This theory for a lot of people seems like, well, how plausible is it? Why would someone do all this stuff and then disappear, right? Mm-hmm. To what end? And it doesn't seem like bin Laden would be the kind of person who would just disappear without continuing some sort of fight. But I feel like it's important for us to note that. And with that, those are some of the more, what's the word we use in the video, Matt? Persistent conspiracy theories regarding Osama bin Laden, both the career in terrorism as well as his death at the hands of SEAL Team 6, or in 2001 from bombing by U.S. forces, from Marfan syndrome, from lung complications, etc. And I would love to hear from someone who knows more or has some proof or has something entirely different. But wait. Speaking of hearing, do you hear that? Or is it just, am I having a stroke, or is it?
Pretty sure it's a stroke. Nope, there it is.
Well, that can only mean one thing, ladies and gentlemen.
Are you sure you're not having a stroke?
Oh, wait.
It's Noel, maybe. Is this my near-death experience?
Is Noel talking to you right now?
You got a little twitch going on in that eye there. So I'm worried about you.
It's been a rough week. Yeah. I'm worried about me, too.
Ben, who are you talking to?
What's that? I didn't say anything.
Oh, God. I smell toast.
I smell bitter almonds.
All right. Well, I'm not having a stroke, Matt. You're not. Noel, you good?
I'm having some kind of event, but I don't know if it's a stroke.
All right. You want to soldier through this
definitely.
With us? So, it's up to you. Do you want to talk about this episode, or you got something different on your mind?
I've always got things floating around, man, but if you want to keep this going, feel free.
I kind of want to know just what's on your mind.
My exploded car, largely.
What?
That's, a little personal for the podcast, probably.
No. Well, we should say it wasn't, when we say explosion,
it wasn't a car bomb.
It was not a car bomb.
No. It was just its time to die.
Is it official now?
Oh, it's official.
It's very official. Yeah.
It's a dead car. Got a dead car.
Well,
it's cool.
Let's look to the future.
Let's do.
What are you planning on doing for transportation?
Well, in the short term, I have a very dear friend who has an extra car he let me use, so I don't have to make a snap decision and, buy something random just to have something.
That's tough.
So that's good. So nice. I'm feeling pretty good about that. But just, in general, it's just a little bit of a downer.
Sure, man. I liked that car a lot, and I was only in it a couple times.
Yeah. Well,
that you know of.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Sorry, that came out dark.
It had seen its time in the sun.
Oh man, I feel like there should be a
good night, sweet prince.
a goodbye to a car song we could play. I don't know, Motorin?
Yeah, sure.
Well, we do have another uplifting event we could talk about.
Cool.
Matt got a lot of email and some tweets about the earlier announcement from last week.
Yeah, there are several really lovely emails that we've received so far. It does feel weird that you're reading them too, Ben. I forget sometimes, like, oh man, Ben's having to read this advice about my kid. I'm sorry, dude.
Oh no, it totally makes sense. I don't feel like it's my place to respond.
Oh no, you should not respond. Diana and I are actually going to go through and respond to them in our adventures for the next couple of weeks.
in your own time.
Because there are a couple that are fantastic. Like so much more information than I could have ever asked for. And helpful information.
Catch people up on what you asked for last week, in case they don't know.
Well, I was basically like, hey, there's a baby coming. I'm scared. Help. That's what I said. Mm-hmm. And we got some messages from people who, have had experience with children. Mm-hmm. And some of the best stuff was just how to cope with your relationship, like my relationship with my wife while we are trying to take care of this baby, and we're both terrified and stressed out and lacking sleep.
Noel, you have a kid as well. Did you give any advice to Matt?
I mean, we have talks, and I don't tweet them at him or send them to him via email, but we occasionally run into each other in the hall and have little moments where we talk about child rearing stuff.
How old's your daughter now?
She's 6.
She's 6.
Man.
That's a good age. I feel like kids before they get to the double digits, there's this age where, you and I have talked about this off air, there's this age where they just seem so much more intelligent than adults.
I thought you were going to say than they actually are.
No, you could say that about some adults, perhaps, myself included, so I don't feel bad saying that.
Yeah, my kid's creepy smart. She's like the girl in the bad seed. I'm afraid she's going to push me down the stairs when I'm not looking. I'm kidding. She's wonderful.
She's really smart.
Yeah, she is. Yeah. But again, there's always something going on in there, and I'm not always 100% aware of what it is.
Oh, so I have to bring something up really fast. We're talking about kids. Mm-hmm. So I went to Kroger the other day. I think I already told you about this, Ben. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Went to Kroger the other day to get some food. We're stocking up on frozen things so that we can just make them really easily when we're both having downtime.
Sure.
And when I was being checked out, it was a 20-year-old woman who was actually checking me out and an 18-year-old woman who was doing the bagging. Okay. And when I walked up, they were having a long conversation about kids these days. They're always on their cell phones. They got no respect. It was a crazy conversation for very young people to be having. And specifically, they were discussing these kids. They said, oh man, I didn't get my cell phone until I was in middle school. And I just went, oh wow.
Yeah, I don't think I had a cell phone until I was in high school or even beyond.
Yeah.
I had a pager.
I was going to say, are you part of the pager generation, guys?
Oh yeah.
I just couldn't, it was so funny to me to hear that happening already. And I was trying to imagine what your daughter and my son are going to be like.
Yeah, it's weird with her because, she's really good at operating those devices. I don't let her mess with them like all the time, but she likes to play Minecraft, and I have Minecraft on my phone, so I let her mess with that. But, and I'll text her mom, and I'll get a text back that's clearly her.
Yeah.
So she gets it, but she doesn't have her own phone or anything, obviously, but she knows how to work that stuff. She knows how to send pictures. She knows how to take selfies. There was one time where she changed my Facebook profile picture secretly to a picture of her mugging at the camera. So yeah, like I said, creepy smart.
Gotta nip this in the bud.
That's pretty impressive. Yeah. And I guess if we had to speculate, there are a few things that we could think children in the future would look back on as ridiculous, or I can't believe they did that, kind of antiquated things. And one of the biggest, in my opinion, might be having to use your hands to interface with electronics.
Yeah, interface anything with your manually. That seems like, why would you do that?
Right.
Remember that scene in Back to the Future 2 where Marty McFly is using the shoot 'em up arcade game, and the kids go, "Oh, you have to use your hands."
Yeah.
I never understood that joke when I was younger, and then now it's just so obvious.
Yeah,
we're all gonna have implants.
It's on the way, guys. Yeah, you can get Google in your head for free. as long as you listen to the advertisements that play in your mind like you're hearing voices.
You just have to think that you agree to the contract. You don't actually have to sign anything. You just go, yep.
Yeah.
Just a nod.
Just a sub-vocalized nod. Well, that sounds like an episode for another day. Again, we would love to hear from everybody with your opinions on the death of Osama bin Laden. Do you believe the official narrative? Do you think something else happened? And if so, what? You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. You can check out the earlier episodes we alluded to on our website, as well as our YouTube channel. And
that's the end of this classic episode. If you have any thoughts or questions about this episode, you can get into contact with us in a number of different ways. One of the best is to give us a call. Our number is 1-833-STDWYTK. If you don't want to do that, you can send us a good old-fashioned email. We are
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.